All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rise Above Justice Movement, the podcast. My name is Zachary Mallory, and I am the host and the founder of the Rise Above Justice Movement and the Rise Above Justice Movement, the podcast. All right. Georgia is a state that I have chosen to focus on, not only with just this candidate series, but I have a lot of contacts in Georgia. You heard previously on the podcast, and you will hear them again, but Noel Heatherland is an incredible advocate, LGBTQ advocate in the state of Georgia, doing some incredible work, Georgia equality. And this candidate that I'm bringing in now has a very impressive platform. So without further ado, Reed, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Absolutely. So let's talk about Fulton.
Let's do
Let's
it.
talk about first things first. Let's talk about who you are and why it's important for progressive voices to be running in a time of uncertainty and bringing back the hope and the joy to our communities that some have never seen. Right? This is a whole new
hmm
wave of politics. This is a whole new wave of candidates that are running. The younger generation is saying, you know what? I'm done. We're done.
Yeah,
We're supposed to be building and we're destroying. So let's talk about who you are, your story, and how it influences you to run for office.
absolutely. Well, like you said, my name is Reed Stillson. I'm 32. I live here in the Atlanta, Metro Atlanta area. I'm right here in the Buckhead area of Atlanta, running for Fulton County Commissioner, District 3, which is basically the north half of Atlanta, from like Midtown up to Sandy Springs, Northern Perimeter area. And I am a lifelong service worker. I've been working in the service industry since I was 14, since I was bussing tables at a surf and turf restaurant in Jacksonville. You name a position in a restaurant, I've probably worked it, from cook to busboy to dishes to bartending. And most recently, I've spent the last decade or so working in coffee. And I've done everything from just starting coffee with no experience in the industry to being a district manager of multiple locations when I was working for a company called Foxtail in Orlando, to right now working at a company called Dancing Goats Coffee, which is a longstanding staple here in the Atlanta area. I was general manager for the last few years, but I recently stepped down so that I could focus on trying to serve my community in a better way. So that's why I'm here.
The true definition of working class, the true
Yes.
definition of
I clocked out
leadership.
literally an hour ago. I took a shower and I hopped on the computer for this podcast.
I'm grateful to sit down and talk to
Thank
you.
you.
I love the working class. I am the working class. My mom is working, or whenever she was working, she's disabled, and but for many years,
Mhm.
I learned why the working class has been pushed to the side. I've lived it. I've seen it. And my Black and Brown community members have faced it even more so with
Mhm.
discrimination in employment. And kind of brings me into like the next talking point, or like the next, question I'm going to ask you about, which is affordability, which is a big part
Mhm.
of your platform. And coming from the working class and coming from the service industry, you understand all too well that the rent is too damn high. Um,
Yes.
Especially in marginalized areas. Atlanta has a very rich history. Fulton County has been a target, for quote unquote voter fraud, right? Nothing's came from that because
Wonder
you're
why. Uh,
it's just common sense, right?
mhm.
Something that obviously a lot of people lack, but thinking about affordability in Fulton County, in
Mhm.
Georgia, in Atlanta, you know, what are some of the concerns that you are hearing? Like, if you've been out canvassing, you've been out talking to people, you've been out, I don't know if you have been or if you haven't been, but if you have been,
Mhm.
can you kind of touch on like what you're hearing as some of those concerns around like affordability and what you're seeing?
Absolutely. It is far and away the most common topic I hear about. Under Everyone will phrase it in a different way, but I hear the frustration with the economic system we're in right now from everyone. Like one thing that motivated me to run here was working in a community hub. Coffee shops can often function as a third space for many people. They may not be a free third space, which we need more of, but they are still a wonderful community hub. And it's one of the reasons I love them. And I'm able to interact and meet and get to know so many regulars in our community from every different background you can think of. And whether these people are some of them are Trump voters. Some of them are former Republicans who flipped. Some of them are as far, socialists. Some of them are just working single moms trying to get through. It doesn't matter what their background is. I hear constantly things such as property taxes constantly going up and they can't afford it. They are, maybe they are retired and they're on a fixed income. They can't afford to see those taxes continue to go up, whether they are having to choose between getting healthcare or putting food on the table for their family, having to work multiple jobs, having to deal with an ever increasing cost of living in every sense of the word, while also getting worse and worse diminishing returns on what they're paying for. Not only is the rent going up, but the apartments are getting worse. Um, you may have heard a term, shrinkflation is a common term you'll see in like grocery stores where, the bag of chips you love to get or the eggs, maybe not eggs are a good example. Let's say like snacks or meat, the cost not only goes up, but you're getting less in that you're buying. The ounces on the side are going down and down. That's not just in food, it's happening everywhere. Your return on what you're paying for is less. And we are squeezing people too tight, and people are looking for something, anything to change. I think it's part of the reason we got Trump in the first place. Yet, of course, I think that only exacerbated these issues. But I completely understand with why in that first election, people were looking for anything to get them out of this. I think we need to hear these people and understand. And that's why I wanted to run as someone who has been working class his whole life, who still has bills to pay, who has to make big decisions, who has to take his cat to the vet soon for an issue, and also has to, save up to try to make a trip to see family at some point in the year. Living just day to day is not easy. And I have a hard time trusting that many of our current politicians are actually hearing that. They may say they are, but one example, one of my opponents loaned himself $100,000 to start his campaign. The committee to elect Lee Morris was loaned $100,000 from Lee Morris. And how am I supposed to believe that you really understand what it's like or have the best interests at heart? You are not the type of person who is living the same life as the vast majority of people in this county. No matter how much good work you may have done in the past, we need people who know what it's like, who are experiencing this firsthand. And that is a major reason why I wanted to run. I wanted to see more people like me.
Which literally goes into the exact next thing that I wanted to address with you was money in politics. Oftentimes we hear
Mhm,
about PAC money or what you just described and what you just mentioned. I was like, this is a perfect
mhm,
segue into talking about what you're seeing on like the local level running for office and what it's been like for you to run for office, that process of it. Walk us through your journey like up to this point
mhm,
and kind of talk a little bit about what you're seeing as far as like money in politics on the local level. Oftentimes we hear about it in Congress, we hear it about in like
mhm.
governors, etc. But let's shine a light on like that local because there's a lot of similarities here and it ain't talked about nearly enough at all.
No, it's not. And you know what? I'm going to dive a little deeper even and
Mhm.
talk about some of the behind the scenes that people may not realize when it comes to running for office. So let me just give you a bit of background here. If anyone ever out there wants to run for office, here is generally how it goes. You're first just going to do some research, learn whatever you need to do. But when you actually create your campaign committee, it's basically a business, technically in a legal sense, like a nonprofit. You are going to have to start funding this campaign. And some of that is obvious things. You need to pay for yard signs or you need to pay for mailers. You need to come up with ways to get your name out there, to communicate your message to as many people as possible so that ideally they show up on election day or early voting and they are able to recognize your name They agree with what you stand for and they check that box next to it. That is the basic logistics of it. But one thing that is very underlooked is the effort and work that is necessary to fund a lot of this. I am trying to run this on, frankly, a very bare bones budget. And the reason for that is a few. When you're trying to raise money, here's the very first thing you're going to do as a candidate. You're going to go into your contacts. You're going to find every single person you ever have received a number from. You're going to reach out to them. And you're going to say, hey, remember me from ninth grade? We had that class once. Well, I'm running for office, and I'm really hoping you would be willing to join me, be willing to help make a difference in my community here. You are basically calling every single person you've ever met and asking for money. And you have to do that not only to cover the basic expenses, but to compete in any way with other people who are either independently wealthy or who have connections with vast amounts of money, such as PACs, not even just super PACs, but even locally. I've run into so many PACs who have reached out to me independently to try to offer money, and I've had to turn down because I simply do not stand for what they stand for. And sure, I could take their money and say, yeah, I'll totally do that. And then I get in the office and I do the opposite. But it's more about the principle of it that I need people to trust me that when I'm in office, that I'm going to have their best interest. That's why I wanted this to be funded by, you know, people who care, local community members, family, loved ones. But here's another thing that people don't realize. I think more people are very in tune to the obvious influence of billionaires, large corporations, lobbyists. They write a check. Oh, the person who votes against, economic reform for coal mining, they happen to get a bunch of donations from people who work in the coal industry. What do you know? But this is also affecting even people who would consider themselves progressive or trying to fight for our issues. I had a consultant who was helping me sort out this fundraising thing. And he told me after I told him that my parents-in-law, they donated $1,000, massive amount of money for two teachers to give up out of their own heart to this campaign. And he said, that's not enough. If they really care about you, they got to give you more. That is too distant from the human connection here that I'm for. We are allowing this need, and it is definitely a need when you are facing so much money. We are allowing it to poison how we act and behave, even amongst ourselves. And it opened my eyes to just how deep and pervasive this issue is. So I really, really want people to understand that having money, the dollar bill, plays such a massive role in the direction of our communities, of our societies, means that having money play such a big role means that inevitably the human condition will never be first. When your system is built around number go up, and that's it, if that is your ultimate motivator, inevitably you will make decisions that put the human second. And that is everything in our life. And I'm seeing it everywhere. So it is not easy. I am outspent. I am outgunned when it comes to some of the resources this money can buy. But what they can't buy is motivation. They cannot buy real life experience, and they can't buy real connections with human beings out in the community. Where I've made most of my connections is working in a coffee shop. I see new people. I talk to them every day, and I'm able to actually feel and hear what they care about. And I can hopefully, with the support of people like this, actually put into effect, into law, or in some means, measurably, tangibly change our communities for the better in a way that people actually feel and actually want.
Everything you're saying, obviously, is literally just common sense. Okay, I want to be frank. It literally
You
is just
work
common
in the service
sense.
industry long enough, you learn just how uncommon that sense is.
Exactly. I've worked in retail.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked in healthcare. I've worked in the nonprofit sector.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a mix of people. I've seen a mix of things. I've seen a mix of corruption in like literally all of it. Because yes, it does still exist in nonprofits. There's still politics that plays a role in it.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not, people do not realize that. People don't understand that. But I can speak from firsthand experience about what I have seen, which as I mentioned a little bit ago, whenever we first began, that Fulton County has been a target of this like voter fraud like
Hmm. Absolutely.
conversation, for lack of a better term. But it has
Hmm.
been. Can you talk about like what obviously is currently working as far as elections go
Yeah.
in Fulton County, but also in Georgia? I mean, we see what's happening on national level, but let's kind
Hmm.
of zone in a little bit on Georgia specifically, and even more specific of Fulton County. Like I said, it's been a target by Trump administration. It's been a
Hmm.
target by a number of FBI. Um, if I remember like reading correctly, didn't the FBI like recently come in and like try to
Yes.
look at like voting records and such and like
Stole a whole lot of
seize
documents
it
from
and
us.
like
Hmm.
so talk about elections
Yeah,
and like what you're seeing and what's working, what's not working, and what needs to change.
certainly. Well, to try to sum up for those who may not be super intimately aware, here in Fulton County, this county is the largest county in Georgia. It is home to over 1 million people. 1.2, I think, is the last census, if I recall. And it is a cornerstone of some very big electoral and political changes we've seen in the last decade. Georgia, as many people know, had two democratically elected senators, Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff, who were able, when Biden won, to give us a blue majority in the Senate. That was massive in terms of trying to pass anything. Now, given that that was such a key role in shifting power away from the Republicans in office, that means that there's a spotlight on Georgia, especially the largest county in Georgia being Fulton, as you have an opponent such as Donald Trump, who has very loudly and adamantly claimed for voter fraud. And of course, he's going to try to find any of the hot button areas or places that caused the most damage to him. There's a famous phone call back when he lost in 2020 where he was, on the phone trying to search for about 11,000 votes or so. That's all he needs just to win. And here's the thing. Fulton has had a history of not inaccurate elections, but I will say poorly run elections in the sense of understaffing or having people take ages to get ballots counted. That's another issue that led to a lot of this rise in electoral denialism is people, oh, what? The voters are all of a sudden changing because mail-in ballots take a while to count because they didn't fully understand the process. And Georgia did need to improve that process, especially in Fulton. And they did. I recently, last year, took a class in Fulton. They have the Fulton County Citizens University, and it's anyone who lives in Fulton can sign up. And every week you take a class and learn more about how the county government works. And a big focus of that was the elections, because the county and the county government is in charge of elections here. And we have this massive new elections hub, which puts these massive data centers to shame. It's huge in South Fulton. And we did a tour of it. We got to speak to a lot of the people who run these elections, who organize who goes where to work polls, who sets up the security that we have. And anyone who has actually been in this elections hub, who has spoken to the people working this, will be fully reassured just how secure, transparent, and reliable our elections are and have been for the past few years. These people know what they're doing. They are extremely good at what they're doing. So they have built up this reputation recently of being a very reliable electoral system. Now, I'm going to take a step away from the local side, and I want to talk big picture for a second because I think people really need to understand how this all ties in. Recently, there was our national FBI. They raided this elections hub and they took pallets, stacks upon stacks of voter records and ballots. They did this. I'm going to get into speculation that I think will personally make sense, but I want people to understand that this is not what they are going to tell you. This is not what they are going to announce it. They suspect quote unquote voter fraud. And the reason they do that is because, as we all know, there are quite a lot of people currently in charge of our federal government who have committed crimes across the board. When you have put yourself in a position of power that gives you immunity from the consequences of those crimes, you are reticent to put yourself in a position that removes that immunity. You do not want to give up that power because that is going to open you up to lawsuits, imprisonment, or some form of retribution for the crimes you've committed against our country. People do not give up power easily once they have it and they know that they are at risk of retribution. So they are going to find any and every way to keep that power. A very key way they can do that is using places like Fulton County, which they've already spread the narrative for years. Fulton has election fraud. They repeat it over and over, hoping it'll be true if they say it enough. Now that they've laid that groundwork, all they have to do is steal our ballots. They did not give us notice. They did not have justifiable permission. The warrant they presented was signed under dubious circumstances. And I would be shocked if in the next few months before November, they don't come back and say, hey, here's the evidence they quote unquote found to prove that this is not fair. And then what they're going to do is they're going to kick it back to the state because they passed an election bill here in Georgia, which means that if there is some form of suspected fraud or improper election process in a county, the state election board will take over. The current county election board is fairly progressive and does a good job of defending our elections. The state election board is MAGA controlled. So you can see how this would give them the leverage they need to paint a picture of fraud or untrustworthiness and seize control at the state level, which is controlled by people who are sensitive or in line with the federal government and the current authoritarian regime that has been consolidating power. So to bring that full circle, that is why local elections and local community is so crucial in moments like this. There's a quote I recall, I can't remember where I read it, but it stuck with me that the antidote to tyranny is community. And I have felt that more and more recently. When we stare at our phones and they say all these terrible, distressing things that get us scrolling forever, worried and stressed, the solution to that, fighting back against these very real threats, is getting out, getting to know your neighbors, getting out in your community, talking to people, and being engaged in local politics, especially, which has the most tangible direct effect on our everyday lives. So I know that's a lot to take in, but I cannot emphasize enough just how important it is that people are not, I don't know if people are ready to hear, we may have already had our last free and fair election. It may be too late. I wish I had gotten involved earlier, and I know many people do, but we can't go back and change. All we can do is try to do better tomorrow than we did today.
Exactly. 100%. And again, it leads into the next thing is about the progressive tax structure. So obviously taxes are extremely high. And
Yes.
what we're seeing in a lot of communities is these AI data centers that are being built. And there's a lot of concern around this, including the rise in utility costs, the rise in like property taxes, the rise in a number of different things. And Georgia is no stranger to taxes whatsoever. But on your platform, you talk about progressive tax structure. What
Yes.
do you see as working now and what doesn't, if there is anything that's actually working, for the people versus a corporation versus these billionaires versus these facts, and the money influence obviously contributes to a lot of this. But what does the progressive tax structure look like? What works, what doesn't work in the current structure of what we're currently seeing?
So there is one major gaping hole in our tax structure that is really at the core of affecting everything that we do. So we have the majority of funds here in Fulton County are collected via property taxes, roughly 85%. And that means we have a general fund for this entire county of over $1 billion. And The majority of that coming from property taxes means that we do not have the ability at the county level to institute certain taxes that may counter that or raise money. So we are limited by certain state legislation that would otherwise allow us to implement a different tax structure to pull together funds. So if we are going to work with the system we have, with the powers we have, we need to work within the property tax structure that we use. And the biggest hole there has to do with property taxes of large corporate properties and developments, what I like to call trophy properties. These are massive buildings. Sometimes they're hotels, sometimes they are data centers, sometimes they are big business buildings like the Google building in Midtown or famous place in Atlanta called Ponce City Market. There are large buildings around the area. We have a Beltline, which is beautiful and has some big buildings there that are not paying their fair share in taxes compared to the rest of us. Now, if you are a homeowner, I'm a renter myself, but if you're a homeowner, the way your property taxes work are that they'll say, hey, your home is worth XYZ. We base that off of the local market. We can get into how fair or not fair that can be, but generally they are close to accurate. It may be a little high, but it is closer than it should be for most places. Where they're not accurate is these larger big properties. So hotels, for example, on average pay about 40% of what they normally would if it was charged the same way as a house would. Data centers pay on average 10% compared to what they would if they were charged the same rate as people living in houses. We are missing out on hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue because instead of appraising these buildings at a fair rate, you can look at, for example, the QTS data center on the west side. It was valued at, by the people who built it, roughly $1 billion. I think it was like $950 million, roughly $1 billion value. Yet our tax appraisal website, they appraised that building as if it were worth about $100 million. So they paid taxes as if they were worth 10% of what they actually are. That is pervasive. If you look at every single property with a worth of $15 million or more in Fulton County, we are looking at missing roughly $500 million in annual tax revenue. We currently have roughly $1 billion in tax revenue. That's an increase of 50% that we could be spending on our people, that we could be reinvesting in our community. I can happily get into the weeds on the specifics of which tax policy and where these dollars should go. But let's acknowledge the fact that we are going to continue to we're going to get those taxes somewhere. The county is going to pay for things and they're going to get it somewhere. And if they're not going to get it from those who have the most, these corporations that can't afford it, they will continue to take it from the people who do not have the most, who cannot afford these increases in taxes. So that is a huge aspect and loophole that I want to see closed. I would like us to find as many ways as possible to collect a fair share. I'm not looking to look, I'm a democratic socialist. I am not a fan of the oligarchical system that you see across our country. But I also don't think, I'm not saying someone should be punished because they have a lot of money. I'm saying they have earned a lot of that money off the backs of our community. They use the roads we paid for with taxes. They use the water. They use the electricity. Data centers are destroying our water, destroying our economy. They are using so much electricity. They are raising our rates. They should pay for it. I think that's fair. And the fact that we have so many current candidates who either refuse to acknowledge that it's even a problem or will say there's nothing they can do about it is not enough. So I'm hoping that we can at least build awareness about this, and I can get into office and try to build a stronger coalition and work with the powers we have to just make these large corporations pay their fair share.
Speaking of getting into office, there was a historic win that took place in Atlanta with Kelsey Bond.
Yes.
They are the very first Democratic Socialists elected to Atlanta City Council. This is a really big pivotal moment because the working class is getting elected across the country. We saw it in New York City, we saw it in
Mhm.
Seattle, we see it in Atlanta, we see it in all of these places across the country that, to be frank, these current systems are not working for the poor and the working class and the people that are most marginalized.
Exactly.
Kelsey's campaign comes from the labor organizing, comes from the working class,
Hmm.
brings that structure and the systemic change that is incredibly inspiring. I was so excited to hear that Kelsey won this election. This was a pivotal moment in Atlanta. This is the people power that we all have. So I believe that a better tomorrow is obviously going to come. It's just a matter of when and who we're going to have lead us into that moment. Generations before us paved the way to where we are now. It is our job, the younger generations, to carry it forward and to continue doing it even bigger and better and carry on the dreams of our ancestors and bring like this true like dynamic shift whenever we think about politics. For far too long, people have not trusted politicians because it gets very
Hmm.
ugly. It gets very
Yeah,
disgusting because of
don't blame them.
that money influence. I don't trust my
Hmm.
elected officials either, especially my current congresswoman. But anyway, that's a whole different that's a whole different conversation. But because of this big like APAC influence, this
Yes.
big like fossil fuel influence. But let's talk about Kelsey's campaign for a second.
Yeah.
What did you see them out there doing? Because they use they them pronouns.
Hmm.
What did you see them out there doing as far as like the organizing going? And like, were you watching this campaign and kind of like seeing it unfold? And then
Yeah, I was knocking doors for Kelsey.
what did you
Mhm.
hear as far, and we'll dive back into your campaign, but I'm kind of creating a comparison here into what you are doing and what Kelsey did and what's going to work for Georgia and what you're hearing Georgians say. I think it's Georgians, right? What you're hearing Georgians say is like their top concerns, not only whenever you were out door knocking for Kelsey, but also what you are hearing as far as concerns like the county level and then like that local level. It's directly connected. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. The the thing you'll notice when you actually get out there and talk to your neighbors, we agree on so much more than we disagree on.
Yeah.
Social media, the AI-driven algorithmic system that populates our feeds will try to make us think that there is no middle ground, that there are extremes, your team and the opposite team. And that is simply not the case. Now, I do think there are serious threats that we need to unite against. But when it comes to your neighbors and everyone in your community, there is a lot more overlap. And I found, at least from my perspective, what was so impressive and exhilarating about a campaign like Kelsey Bond's was not only the enthusiasm behind it, but they showed that there was there was an eagerness for these policies that they were running on, whether it was Beltline Rail, as you know, an increase in improvement in local transit opportunities, building an economy for the 99%, working to push back against Cop City referendum years back. They're trying to fight against big money in local politics and a lot of the corruption, which Atlanta has a sad history of. These are issues that everyone really cares about. And I don't think I'm exaggerating by much. This is something that people, whether they consider themselves a democratic socialist or a Democrat, or they're not involved in politics with a progressive, or they're libertarian, it doesn't matter. What they are seeing is that there are politicians who are not knocking their doors, who are telling them the way it should be, who are not involved in their community, they're not seeing them at the local coffee shop. They're not seeing them out actually helping people, doing some mutual aid work, helping the homeless. They are not there actively trying to build a community. They are trying to get their next clip that they can post online. They are trying to raise big money donors. They are oftentimes there are still good people trying to do good work and they're up against a big battle, but it's very easy for people to feel like no one cares. They never even see you. So I think what inspired so many people about the Kelsey Bond campaign was actually seeing Kelsey and their name and shirts out there. They were in parades, they were knocking doors, they were walking the belt line. They were just normal people out and about trying to talk to their neighbors and get people involved to make a difference. And that is invigorating. That is motivating because I will tell you, as someone who is generally a cautiously optimistic person, despite how much the universe may try to beat that out of me sometimes, I got into this. I started meeting with local politicians and I was instantly put off on some of the things they were saying and doing. I had, current politicians tell me, don't worry about knocking doors. That's pointless. Get a couple photo ops and then focus on calling your big donors. And I just can't trust that you have our neighbors and my own best interest at heart if you can't even take the time to go out and try to meet me halfway and meet the voters where they are. They expect the voters to meet the politicians where they are, and that's simply not how it is. So I hope that more people take away the community aspect of this, actually getting out there, talking with people, getting to know them, being present. Another campaign that ultimately, sadly, did not win, but came very close was Rohit Malhotra, who ran for Atlanta City Council president, which is essentially like the vice mayor of the city. Rohit is a wonderful community organizer and activist, has been fighting in Atlanta for quite some time, is very well spoken and knowledgeable and empathetic and cares so much, and will definitely still be involved in the community. And this is the type of person who is, taking MARTA, our local train, to work or to events, to City Hall to give comment. Meanwhile, just the other day, the current city council president who won passed legislation to get private taxpayer funded limo service to drive them around town. This is exactly what turns people away from local politics. They think it's the same old, and it's because it oftentimes is. It's why we need more people who actually know what it's like, because we cannot trust that you're going to have our best interests at heart if you aren't even in our community. So I could rant about this forever, but ultimately it all comes back to community. It has to come back to knowing your neighbor, being out there and seeing what the real world is like. Otherwise, what are you even fighting for?
You asked $1 million question. What are you fighting for? And the even better part of this is, who are you fighting
Yeah.
for? Are you going to fight for the people that live in your area? Or are you going to fight for this big fossil fuel company that contributes to climate change?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're seeing astronomical amounts of rising costs. Wages go down, costs go up, and or wages stay the same because a lot of
Yeah.
states base their minimum wage off the federal minimum wage, which has not increased in decades.
Mm-hmm.
So it's obvious people are fed up. It's obvious people are tired. It's obvious people are exhausted of the current systems, or allegedly systems, right? Um, so thank you for highlighting your experience with going out and canvassing and like helping Kelsey win this election. And I think it's important whenever candidates come together and work on lifting each other up. That's so incredibly important.
Mm-hmm.
The mutual aid aspect is the part that hits the hardest, and that comes from the democratic socialist in me. Can you hear that in the
Yeah.
background?
No.
Okay, good. I'll edit this part out, don't worry. But let's jump in and talk about the Fulton County jail that's there.
Yes.
I know this is a really big topic. I know this is
Yes.
huge. The conditions are absolutely terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've mentioned it a couple times on this podcast, but I watched a documentary that I believe is on HBO Max, and it came out last year. That's called The Alabama Solution, and it talks
Mm.
about the issues that people that are incarcerated are currently facing, the horrific conditions, flooding. There's violence that goes on in there. Like people are
Mm-hmm.
literally dying from being incarcerated at the hands of the guards, the hands of people that are supposed to be there to protect. Geez,
Mm-hmm.
sounds familiar, right?
Go figure.
But it's part of the same system. These
Mm-hmm.
oppressive systems that were built to, these systems were not built for us. The
No.
criminal justice system the juvenile justice system, the healthcare system. It wasn't built for us. It was built to harm us. It is up to us to. I'm a big abolitionist.
Mm-hmm. Same.
There comes a time where you can only fix things so many times and fix it so much before there is no more fixing to it. It just needs to be abolished.
Yes.
Abolish
An
ICE,
entirely
first
new
of all.
system.
But
Say less. Abolish ICE. Let's go.
that'll be the next thing that we'll kind of talk about right after this. And then we'll close with how people can contribute to your campaign.
Sure.
Because obviously, money, right? But in a good way, the grassroots. So
yeah.
We'll touch on that here in just a second. But let's talk about that Fulton County Jail. What are some of the issues with specifically the Fulton County Jail, but also across the state of Georgia, like just the criminal justice system? What are you seeing? What works? What doesn't work? And just kind of run me through that, like what you're seeing with the Fulton County Jail.
So I could talk for quite a long time about the inhumane conditions in the current Fulton County Jail. It is old, it is broken down, there are people sleeping on the floor, it is overcrowded, and that's after they've loaned out people who are incarcerated to other means of incarceration, the Atlanta City Detention Center or other counties. It is a nightmare from top to bottom. And the current solution being proposed is to spend $1 billion of taxpayer money on building a big brand new jail. And I just think we are going about this all wrong. There's so many things that I'm seeing wrong here, but I'm going to tell you a little brief anecdote. Going back to the Fulton County Citizens University class I was in, one class we had a presentation from the marshal's office. And what the county marshal's office does, they do a lot, but a large aspect of their responsibilities has to do with evictions. And they were discussing and showing a video of an eviction they were doing on a home. And it was like watching Cops. They had edited this video with background music and a bunch of people showing up in tactical vests and guns to evict people out of this home who were maybe they were squatting, or some of them were they simply didn't have a home and they found an empty one and they tried to seek some shelter. They were dealing drugs out of it or something. They came up with some justification for showing up with a massive amount of force. And when they got there, there was no one in the home. And the person presenting said, sadly, there was no one there, so we didn't get any action. That is the mindset, the mentality of people who are supposed to be keeping us safe. If they are disappointed that they didn't get to fire a weapon, get to arrest someone, how do you reform that? How do you rebuild that? I don't believe you can. I'm sure there are plenty of people who get into some form of law enforcement with good intentions. I have met plenty of people who have the brightest eyes and ideals of how to better their community, and they think the best way to do it is some form of maybe law enforcement or first responder. And many of these can be very effective. Firefighters, I mean, there's no song out there called "Fuck the Firefighters," for a reason. They do a lot of great work. But we have to acknowledge the fact that you simply can't reform a system that is designed and structured to cause harm in some way. And to remove that system does not mean we are removing safeguards. We can still build a safe community, but I need people to understand that there is not only one way to do things. This is a very new thing, and we can absolutely try to tackle safety in our community and justice, personally, from my perspective, from the root, which has to do with people who are, if someone is going to, rob someone, or maybe they're in jail because they were just out on the street loitering, or whatever the cause is, why are we not focusing on why these people were in this position in the first place? Was it lack of access to affordable housing or lack of access to mental health care? Was it lack of proper education growing up? What are we not investing in that is leading to this long term? Because otherwise we are going to keep falling into this system where, like it or not, people are going to spend their taxes on correcting this issue some way or another. Let's look at homelessness, for example. There are roughly 3,000 people in Atlanta who are unhoused, and our tax dollars are going to go to those people in some way. Right now, they're being spent putting them in jail, or they're being spent on sending officers to go ask them to leave the bus stop because they can't be there, or whatever other means. They are simply pushing the problem, doing a big old Patrick from SpongeBob. Let's take the problem, let's push it somewhere else. We are not actually focusing on the root. We are not addressing the fact of why did this become a problem in the first place? And unless we acknowledge that, unless we actually invest the money, I mean, of our $1 billion budget, Fulton County spends roughly 48% of that, almost a little over $500 million towards justice and safety. We are spending hundreds of millions of dollars. I think if I remember correctly, it's one in every five tax dollars goes towards the sheriff's department. I don't know about you, but I would much rather that money did not go towards arresting people, but went towards putting people in a position where they are a wonderful, growing member of our community, trying to give people an opportunity. Now, I get flack for this sometimes because, I try to defend people who have done the worst things. I don't agree with people doing something terrible, whether it's a murder or lighting a building on fire or something. It's not about that. It's about what caused that person to do that. And are we willing to acknowledge that human beings are flawed? And are we willing to acknowledge that we as a society have strength to put people in better positions to reduce the opportunity for them to do that? I am an abolitionist. I want us to focus on the human and invest in people, not imprisonment. And I believe we can. We just have to have the willpower.
You are speaking my absolute language, and thank you for the reference you just made because it just made my entire day. Absolutely, yes. And these issues have been building up over time. This is not something that's brand new. This is something that's been going on for many, 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 many decades. And, you know, it's wild because I'm sitting here talking to candidates that are like progressive and, from center left is who I'm focusing on, like very, very heavily. More importantly, just those Democratic Socialist candidates, because Kelsey inspired it. You were inspiring the hell out of me right now, like thinking about
thank you.
This campaign that you were running, because you're bringing the true populism side of it, that left populism. It's been proven to work. And it's also just pure common sense, which again is something that obviously a lot of politicians lack. Hence the reason why you're running, right?
Yeah.
You would think in 2026 we would be so much further than where we are now, but that's okay. It just means we have more to work on, but we need to get those people in there that actually give a damn about it, that says no to these corporate interests, that says no to this PAC money, and it's purely grassroots. What has grassroots looked like? And this is the next to last question. I know we're coming up on time here in just a minute, but what has grassroots looked like to you, and what does that people-powered campaign look like to you? Because this is a big fuck you to those corporate dollars, those other interests, etc. But what does grassroots mean, and what does it look like?
For me, it simply means going back to what I was talking about. It's community. It's your neighbors. It is, if you need to pay for yard signs or t-shirts, or you're going to go knock some doors, you ask the people you talk to your neighbors. Now, one thing that I've been doing with my campaign that I've found incredibly successful, that I hope others in either a similar position or industry can try, I like to call it guerrilla canvassing. I work in a coffee shop. I see thousands of people a day, and I talk to them as much as I possibly can. I already know these people. I see them all the time. I know their names. I know their order. I know what they like to do for a living. I know their pets' names. So that right there, there's a level of trust here. We know each other as human beings. That already has broken down a major barrier. And if you are not going to have that trust, you're not going to go anywhere. So it starts with that trust. And then from there, it's simply asking. You have to have the courage to ask and say, hey, I hope you're having a good day. Thanks for checking in, the other day. I appreciate you. I wanted to ask, we're going to be knocking some doors for my campaign. It's actually going to be around the neighborhood here. Would you be willing to come by and, try to get some more people involved in making our community better? Sure, some people will say no. Some people are just, hey, good job, you got this, that's it, and they'll walk away. You would be shocked at the amount of people who say yes. The amount of people who would, if they can't participate, they'll donate money, or they will at least let someone know who maybe can participate. The amount of people who are willing to help their neighbor that they know, that they trust, is so much higher than people I think realize. And whenever I have felt disheartened or running up against the wall at the politic and at the nonsense that I see, what brings me back is out there talking to people. It's seeing people actually care in a time where we are at a major turning point in our lives, in our nation, and our world. It's also a major opportunity, an opportunity for us to rethink how we've gone about things and to try to do better than we have in the past. So, if I could offer any advice to anyone, grassroots to me just means talking to your neighbor, getting to know people, building that trust. And from there, you will be shocked at not only how much like joy that may bring you, but how much joy that will spread. It is infectious. And I have been so surprised by how many people who I never would have thought would contribute or would even care, who have donated money or knocked doors with me or made phone calls or just spread the word, taken flyers and brought it to their building. Um, one of my favorite regulars, Gary, comes in, gets his same, maple latte every single day. He walks from his senior home that he lives in. He helped me set up. He invited me to do speaking, a bit of a presentation at his building. Like it only gets easier the more you do it, but you have to do it. It is a muscle. It is something you have to train, and the more you do it, the more you will feel that enjoyment and that fulfillment. So I cannot emphasize that enough. It's so easy to tune out the world, lay in bed. I'm a homebody by nature sometimes. I love just being at home and watching a movie and cuddling with the cats, but I always feel so much better getting home for doing something like this. So if I can offer any advice to anyone is to just get out there and try. Try again. And if that doesn't work, try something different. But as long as you try, that's all we can ask of each other.
Um, how can people contribute to your campaign? And how can they uplift the work that you were doing, follow you on social media, get out volunteering for you? And first, I guess the the big thing here is, when is your primary?
Great question. So May 19th is the election day for the Democratic primary, Fulton County Commissioner. But more importantly, early vote starts this upcoming Monday on the April 27th. So I'm not sure when this will air compared to when we're recording it, but like early vote will likely be going on when people are listening to this. And so in order to, if you want to learn more about that, you can go to my website is reedstillson.com. It's just my name.com, reedstillson.com. Or you can follow me on socials. It's Reed Stillson ATL or at Reed Stillson ATL. And you'll find my email there. You'll find my number. Just reach out and ask. There's a form you can fill out if you want. You can donate. But frankly, what's most important is not only that you vote, but talk to your neighbor. Talk to someone you haven't talked to before. If you live in an apartment building, most people don't know their neighbors. I don't know all my neighbors, but I've gotten to know a few. I've seen them walking by. I know their names, and just show them that you care, that they're another human being just like you. Get out there, talk about what's important to you, and I think you'll find you agree on a lot more than you disagree. And from there, you can find your polling place, go early vote. Early voting is the best way to do it personally. We have our local Buckhead Library walking distance here that I have always early voted at, and it's super convenient. You walk in and out real quick. But look up if you don't know, ask. There's plenty of local communities or groups, whether it's local party groups like the Democratic Party, Fulton, or the Democratic Socialists of America here in Atlanta. Just look it up and ask, and you would be shocked at what you'll find, especially how how encouraging it is. It's what keeps me going, and I hope it's what keeps y'all going too. So please get out in your community, get to know your neighbor, and if you want to learn more about our campaign or support what we're doing, reedstillson.com and reach out to me. I'd love to chat more and see what you care about. Together we can build a Fulton for all.
There you go. I was waiting on you to say that. And that's exactly what I was looking for. And that's why I asked you that
Uh,
question.
does
And
it show that I'm not really a politician? I'm not used to all of this fun stuff, but I'm getting there.
this is the fun part of it because you're building this plane while it's in motion. And we we love democracy. We've had these key
Yeah.
moments of democracy. Have we had a true democracy? I would say no. But there have been some really good moments. Like I said, Seattle, Atlanta,
Hmm.
New York City. It shines a light on what is possible if we just get out and do that work. We need people like you that's not afraid to challenge the status quo, that's not afraid to continue pushing forward. And I know I said that was my last question. I got one more. Have you
Hit
heard of the
me.
term deep canvassing?
Yes.
Deep canvassing,
Hmm.
I actually just recently learned about through my new
Hmm.
friend Marcos, and they run their own organization called We Love Deep Canvassing.
Hmm.
And they also endorse candidates. They're doing, some fantastic work across the country in like key elections. And deep canvassing, for those of you who don't know, you can go back onto the podcast and like listen to Marcos Descalzi, who runs We Love Deep Canvassing. We had an in-depth conversation about what deep canvassing is, what it entails, and why it's important for grassroots and progressive campaigns to get out and just have more than just a conversation with people. Literally do that deep canvas, that deep conversation, find
Yes.
out what they need you to do, and just do it,
Yeah.
because oftentimes people
That's
run on
it.
platforms, they get elected, those platforms go out to the wayside because anybody can say, yeah,
Absolutely.
they can say, yeah, I support Medicare for all.
Hmm.
They get out, these
Sure.
pharmaceuticals come in, they trickle money in, they
Hmm.
flip like, oh, maybe
No
we
longer
can
held accountable.
accountability, integrity, honesty. You got it all. I'm so excited to continue
Thank you.
watching your campaign. And, in the description, as I tell all the candidates that I'm interviewing, it will have your donate link, it'll have your website, it'll have your social media handle. People can listen to this episode and take it back into their community saying, hey, Reed mentioned this really good platform idea. Hold your elected leaders and hold these candidates accountable. Make sure that they follow through. If they don't, vote them the fuck out. It's simple, right? Because
That's
that's
it.
democracy in action. Reed, thank you
Hmm.
so much for coming on the podcast. This
Thank
has
you.
been an absolute joy of a conversation. Thank you. I appreciate you. And good luck in your primary. And
Thank you so
I will
much.
see you around.
I thank you so much, seriously, for the opportunity, and thank you for what you're doing and getting out there and just sharing this word and doing the work that you do. So thank you so much. I really appreciated talking with you, and I look forward to seeing more work from you as well. But take care, and seriously, everyone out there, go vote. You got this. We can do it together. We can make tomorrow better than we did today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.